Hi, my name is David Knight, and welcome to those amazing Psalms. Psalm 62, In God Alone. Psalm 62 is a wonderful psalm of trust, even though it comes out of a time of severe adversity, ongoing adversity. My soul finds rest in God alone. My deliverance comes from Him. The opening word in Hebrew is alone, or only. It's called an emphatic, and David the poet uses it 6 times in this psalm to underscore the unique confidence he has in God. He alone is my rock, my salvation and my fortress. I will never be shaken. When you're going through trial, you can get really shaken up, sometimes a lot. You can feel like the earth is quaking. This psalm is a tribute to the stability that David has found by anchoring himself with all his anxiety in God as his rock and fortress. He'll repeat this opening stanza again because the opposition against him is relentless. How long will you assault a man? Would all of you throw him down, like pushing over a tottering fence or a sagging wall? His opponents can see his weakness, and they are out to get him. They are engaged in the universal contest of king of the castle, competing for superiority. David knows this game all too well. As a younger brother, he was used to being sidelined, and the impulse to prove himself was strong in his soul. But somehow, David had learned that this was a hopeless pursuit. You can become top dog for a day or two, or a month, or a year, but before long, you too will be taken down from your elite position. David had learned that there is only one ultimate place of security, and that is resting in the power and love of God. In verse 5, David repeats the opening refrain, but with this slight twist. Instead of saying, "My soul finds its rest in God alone," he addresses himself. "Find rest, O my soul, in God alone." As if to remind himself, as the pressure leans in on him, hold on to what you know is true. Don't give in. Rest your soul in God. It seems that we never outgrow the need to remind ourselves of what we know in our hearts to be true. But God is not only the resting place of David's heart and the place of firm stability for him, God is also the source of David's honor and pride, his sense of worth. My salvation and my honor come from God. Made in God's image, we are crowned with glory and honor. But when we forget that, we strive to derive our sense of dignity and worth from things like our status, our achievements, or the approval of other people. Verse 10 warns against the lure of wealth as a means of measuring our worth or the worth of others. Riches can be a great gift and a reward, and have the potential to do lots of good things. But beware, says the psalm, wealth can also be seductive. It is so easy to see your net worth in terms of dollars and to count on them for your ultimate security. The psalm says, if riches increase, don't set your heart on them. Jesus told a parable about a wealthy farmer whose bumper crops overflowed his barns. The farmer congratulated himself on his secure future, but the next day he was dead. Jesus said the farmer was a fool, and so are we if we fill our barns with self and not with God. Find rest, my soul, in God alone. The key word in this refrain is rest, or wait, or silence. It is a calm and quiet spirit that does not clamor or fret with impatience. Human beings are by nature restless. In the year 397, Augustine wrote in his spiritual autobiography, The Confessions, "You have made us for yourself, and our heart is restless until it rests in you." Augustine saw this rest as the end of our anxious efforts at proving our worth through our achievements or status. Psalm 62 had special meaning personally for my father. He was a restless soul. He had great aspirations and knew his share of disappointments and failed dreams. But in his later years, I think he learned to accept his place in the world. Not perfectly, but with a measure of contentment. He wrote out by hand the words of this text in Psalm 62 and kept it in the windshield of his car. My soul finds rest in God alone. Whether this was his experience or his aspiration, I'm not sure, but it seemed to express his desire to anchor his life in God. It served as a beacon for his soul. My dad was 64 when he died. Instead of engraving his headstone with the proverbial "rest in peace," we wrote, "Upon God alone does my soul rest peacefully," affirming the confidence my dad had that God was sufficient and that nothing that his restless soul clamored after would ever satisfy or give security like God. This was David's testimony, and one that he urged us to make our own. Trust in him at all times, O people. This is good counsel for all seasons, sometimes more challenging than others. And David goes further, urging us to pour out your heart before him. Trust leads to gratitude. And David invites us to pour out the overflow of our hearts to God, like pouring a glass of wine for a friend, freely and joyously. And when we do it together, the joy is multiplied. The church is always at its best when it pours itself out together in praise to God and in service to others, inspired by our love for God. Psalm 62 ends with a rousing rhetorical flourish. Once God has spoken, twice have I heard this. It's like saying, I told you before, and I'm telling you again, that you, O God, are strong, and that you, O God, are loving. Here is the core of God's character: absolute strength and loyal love. It's the double helix of God's DNA, so to speak: power and love. If God were almighty but not loving, we could never trust him. If he were all loving but powerless, we could never count on him. But God is both: faithful love and powerful arms. In creation, we see God's power and wisdom infusing his world with loving, life-giving purpose and potential. In our daily lives, God's power and love combined to protect us, provide for us, guide and nurture us. We see God's power and love most magnificently in the life of Jesus. His deeds of compassion, giving sight to the blind and grace to the fallen. His death displays God's infinite love more than anything else we've ever seen. And his resurrection shows that love in the power of life over death. That's why those who anchor their lives in God will never be shaken. And like David, we can say, my soul finds rest in God alone. He alone is my hope. Take care.